to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't see you. Come on in.
Okay, welcome to the Warren County Salary Board of October 14th. The meeting is being recorded. Is there any cause for executive session? No? Very well. On the agenda today, we have court hearing, office wages, pretrial officer, creation of a new position, part-time clerical assistant veterans affairs, which is an existing position, will be dropping down to part-time, election workers, salary increase for intake clerk typist, and then the big thing would be the non-union salary increases for 2021 so that fiscal can take the approved amounts and work on the budget. First things first, the increase with the court hearing office wages. We had a quick sidebar beforehand.
I think that the error is that it's actually reclassification from an administrative assistant to an office manager.
Okay,
That's before us. That's the issue before us, and then we adjust the wage.
I see. So it's not a rate, it's not a wage increase for an existing position. It is a job classification change that you're requesting.
Right, which would, and then the wage increase would follow with that.
I see. Okay.
He's actually classified as a secretary, sort of an acronym, but they're almost in the secretary's class.
Okay. Kim, did you want to present anything?
Yes, so as you'll see on the sheet, on the second one, I laid out all of the rates. So you'll see the hourly rate. He currently, for 2020, he's at $13.45 an hour. And then his contract is set for $13.75 an hour. And I guess the thing that I was struggling with is that he is under he's under one the court appointed, and then the court related are the ones that have the 16 something an hour, 16.40 an hour. And I just wanted to make sure that there was no glitches.
Right. So what is the SEIU court appointed office manager? Is there such a position in the contract?
Yes,
So
so
that's what 1420 means.
that one for 2021, and that's the one that we just took to salary for previously this year and increased it to $14 an hour. And we adjusted juvenile probation's office manager as well as adult probation office manager at 14.
Okay, so of the officer, excuse me, within court appointed,
Yes.
is there, just refresh, make sure everyone understands. The SEIU contract has three components, yes? One is court related, one is court appointed, and then there's everybody else commissioners, residual.
Yes.
Okay, so there are three different rates for office managers within this contract?
So there would be two. So the $14 an hour was the one under appointed. So that would be the one for assessment, and one for juvenile probation and adult probation. And we all aligned them back in this way. My concern is that the person in this secretarial position is in that court-appointed unit.
Okay.
The court-related would be the DA and the public defender, and their rates are different. I'm not sure what happened, I'm not,
Right.
it's a contract negotiation thing, is what they said. My concern is if we were to move the secretary to the 16.40 an hour, would that cause an issue in the court-appointed unit? And maybe not, because
How many office managers are there in the court appointed?
so there would be
Would be probation,
the adult probation, juvenile probation,
court appointed, or
and the tax assessment.
the
Taxes.
tax assessment would be a residual, right?
Oh, okay, yes.
But aren't there also, what about the MPJ offices? Where are they?
They're in the court appointed.
You were appointed also?
And they each have a office
Yeah.
manager?
They should each have an office manager, and I believe their wages are higher.
Those are the starting rates from the contract.
The
But the classifications are grouped here.
So the office manager for juvenile probation is 1302 this year. That didn't change?
But we changed that to
That
14.
is what changed?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
right, as well as probation was 1440, and it also changed, or it stayed the same?
It stayed the same.
Juvenile jumped up to
Right.
that because it
Right.
seemed like such an odd.
It was
figure.
lower. That would be me for everybody else for some reason.
Right. The union never ceases to surprise me. Oh, then the PD and DA office managers are the 16th.
Then the 16.
But we don't have the office managers that are MPG related offices.
I don't.
MG, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so they're not there.
I guess I didn't realize that they were classified as office managers.
They're classified, as whatever it states on that sheet is how they're classified.
I'm only seeing office manager for help from juvenile probation,
Adult probation
and adult probation. Yeah, right there, just those two,
and DA.
and the DA, right?
Do you see any of the MPGs?
Secretaries are.
Yeah, the secretary.
Rates.
They're all at higher rates,
I
yeah.
see. Yes, sir.
Their secretarial rates, doing similar things, scheduling and everything are significantly higher, 1540 an hour.
Right, but I think,
He's been there 19 and a half years, so I don't understand why.
Yeah, we're looking at the starting rate over here, right?
Mhm.
So that's the MDJ administrative assistant starting in 2020 would be 1350.
right. I guess, yeah, I didn't know they were classified as office managers.
All right, so the crux of the difficulty right now, just to recap so that I totally understand, is that HR is saying, okay, go ahead and move Waylan into the office manager position, but that starting rate is 1440.
I'm just concerned, I mean,
Right,
because he's
and
under that
the-
contract, and I'm not saying he's not deserving, he's.
Sure,
you know,
right, I
They have
understand.
nothing to do with that, I just want to make sure.
Purely based on the contract, that's, you're saying,
Yes.
great, that's, you know, if you want to start the office manager position, fine, but the contract says it's 1440. The courts are saying that they would like that rate to be 1640 on par with the residual, no, with the court-related
With the
contract.
related, correct.
For union negotiations, could we please get rid of these tiers and
I
just
would
do
love
one
to.
contract?
Very complicated tiers.
I think it was made very difficult in years past. I'm not
My
quite sure
concern
why.
is if we raise the current employee in the court hearing office, that the other people that were moved to 14 are going to have, there's going to be an issue, I guess. Just trying to remain fair and consistent.
Right, because essentially we would.
Well, they don't know how many others, the office manager in juvenile has how many years?
3 or 4.
And he is 19 and a half.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not.
And his duties include the tracking and compiling of office statistics, coordinating matters with attorneys, assisting with annual budget proposals, maintaining the schedule, comprehensive equitable distribution, Excel spreadsheets, answering procedural questions posed by the public, processing legal filings, scheduling court reporter appearances, drafting press feeds for court reporter fees, tracking and ordering supplies and other duties. So it really is a combination. It's a hybrid position. I recognize that.
Right, I think the HR's position is that we're bound by the contractually with the union. So I don't know how we could,
I'm not sure how we would go about changing that at this point.
right, especially at this body, because it wouldn't be the salary board's job to amend the contract.
Right. What I'm looking for is simply to reclassify the position as an office
Okay,
manager.
yeah, okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. Well, so we will, if that's if that's your motion, is to create a position within the court hearing office that is the office manager position, and simultaneously rescind, what is the current position?
Secretary.
Department secretary. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So, again, the starting rate would still be based on what the contract says. but the motion before us is simply to create an office manager position, rescind the secretarial position. And the starting rate, if I understand it, would be $14.40 based on the contract. Okay. And if it's going to be raised, that would need to be done through a contractual
With the union.
change with the union.
Which is just around the corner.
Yes, it is.
So-
And I'm perfectly happy to standardize this across the board.
Yeah.
This is so complicated, unnecessarily complicated.
Remind me what, one of the issues we had similar to this, when they wanted to change someone in the union's pay or classification, and the union was here and basically opposed it. So where are they in this change?
Kim Corey, who was the person who communicated with the union, I have an email saying that she approves. So,
This change?
this change,
Okay.
This change meaning creating an officer.
creating the office manager position.
Any other further questions?
Could you forward that email to Kim, or so we can just put it in the file?
Sure,
That'd be great.
that's fine. I think they did,
Oh, okay.
and retroactive to January 1st, 2020.
Any other questions? Okay. Could you read back the motion?
To create a position, office manager in the court hearing office, and to rescind the department secretary position.
Everyone's in agreement? All right, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Motion carries.
And that is retroactive to January 1, then as far as the change in salary rate.
No,
I don't know that you're allowed to do that with a contractual position.
We still have
Well,
to go in
but-
front of the union.
This was again deferred at your request, and I agreed to that in March.
What would the
So,
financial impact of that be?
I don't know the answer to that, but we didn't, obviously, it's going to be different.
Yeah, my thought would be that it would start at the next pay period.
It would be normal,
Yeah.
sometimes the last.
The difficulty was the pandemic, I think, in part.
right, that was,
Well, I think the main difficulty, that was certainly it was a significant difficulty, but we also don't tend to make changes like this midstream, mid-year. I mean, at this point, we're a couple months from the end of the year, I would imagine we can absorb a couple months difference, that's not gonna be a significant amount of money. But if we go retroactive back to the end of the year, you're going to exceed your budget, no doubt.
I don't know, can you do that contractually? Make something retroactive?
Well, we're not changing the contract, we're just
Oh,
changing
we're
the.
doing-
No, I understand, I understand. I don't know, I'm not a, maybe we need to ask our labor attorney.
Well, I mean, before we would do that, I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of doing that. You know, we have a budget, we're gonna be under tight scrutiny related to taxes due to COVID and economic downturn. I think the fact that we're providing an increase at this stage is a very gracious move on the part of this board.
but yet, when this was initially discussed, I understood there was a hiring freeze, and we hired at least 2 people within the commissioner's office, and 2 new salaries were created. So I'm having trouble understanding that.
Well, I think in this context, I mean, we're providing an increase, which I think, again, like I said, under the circumstances is pretty gracious. The positions that were created offset other positions that were either lost or changed. Like, there's, to my knowledge, been no net add of cost to the county related to those changes.
I'm not aware of what you're referring to actually, what were those officers?
There were fiscal positions created, and there was also a position created within human resources.
Is that accurate? I don't think you've increased staff at all.
Two staff increases.
Right. Well, just Riley,
No, that's the same amount of staff.
we had 2,
You
and
had
we had
2.
1.
Now you have 1. Shifted it over to HR, so that's net. We did employ some elections officials, but that was through CARES Act money, so it didn't affect the county property tax. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, first of all, I'm not sure it's relevant to this vote, but I just don't think it's factually accurate.
The concern I have is that I was told there was a hiring freeze, and I was asked to defer this from March until now. And my concern is that, and I know you're aware of that because you asked me to do that, and I did.
Yeah.
And in that same time, there were other positions that were added, and there were increases in terms of what we needed to spend for salaries because of that. That's all I'm saying. And I appreciate how difficult it is, but I really have concerns about when I'm being respectful of your requests. Am I not doing justice to the court hearing office?
I understand. I think the HR position was budgeted and approved previously, it just wasn't filled. I mean, it had been budgeted, most
We did
definitely,
that
with
in
the 2020
2019
budget.
and 2020.
Right, and it's an offset by the human services department. And then the fiscal position has not increased. We
Actually,
actually
less
did,
right now.
right, so I just don't think that, I understand your concern, but I don't think it's accurate. So anyway, we do appreciate you pushing it, but again, my point is I would not have been in favor of something in March, April, May, or June. Frankly, the only reason I'm in favor of it now is because we're close enough to the end of the year that it's not going to make a significant budget impact. So my understanding of the motion really would be that what we just voted on took effect today. If anyone would like to make a different motion, then they can do that at this time to make the previous motion effective at a different date.
I believe my initial motion was for January 1st, 2020, but retroactive to January 1st,
The
2020.
motion that I had Pam read says what?
There was no date
There's no date for what you
So if you would like to
to
make,
create a position of office manager in the court hearing office and rescind the department secretary position.
and my assumption in that reading was that it would be effective today. Often we set it at the next pay period or the previous pay period, but if you would like to make a motion amending that to January 1st, you can certainly do that.
I don't know if I have enough support. It appears that the commissioners are voting in a block, and if that's the case, I won't do that.
I mean, I just, working in the union environment in the past, that was not an option in my world, but I don't know if that's true or not true. In this particular contract, so from my particular perspective, it would be, effective now. And we did have a hiring freeze, you're absolutely right about that. And just speaking for myself in the conversation that we had, I'm still concerned about what our real estate taxes are looking like, and where we're actually gonna, fall out in all of this. So my position hasn't changed from that particular perspective, but I also appreciate the fact that this person has been with you for a very long time, and it sounds like the person is not doing secretarial work, that they are doing office manager work. And I believe that that should be warranted and recognized. So those are kind of my comments at this juncture.
I think that's something that definitely, in retrospect, having a really good scrubbing of all the positions of the county during negotiations can avoid situations like this going forward.
I agree.
Because there's been historically far too many inconsistencies and things trying to get changed on the fly, which has caused other ripples and other issues. So ideally, going forward, we can make it all about it.
Absolutely. Great.
Just the same thing for you, Mr. Anderson, is that your position as well?
Pardon me?
Is that your position as well? I just wanted to clarify.
I'm not sure to me what my position is. On
In
the
terms
contract
of-
negotiations?
No, in terms of when the office manager position should be effective.
Effectively.
Effective date.
I mean, my preference would be the next pay, but I mean, if it's today or whatever, I'm
I'm
fine.
happy to go back to the previous, would that be last week?
would make a difference for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with anything as long as it's not retroactive, just because I think that requires a lot of work and then also additional costs that I just think is unnecessary. So that's all.
Okay, so there was CARES Act money available for the new positions, but not for this.
The elections
Okay,
position.
thank you.
That's
I
it.
appreciate that. But with that, I know that the majority would not be in favor, so the effective date would be as of today then.
Commissioner Nicholson suggested possibly to the last pay, did I misunderstand that?
To the next pay.
I don't want to miss.
If it's, no, I defer to HR as long as it's not considered a retroactive.
It could be effective the current pay cycle.
Okay, which would be a few days ago.
Yes.
Okay, I'm happy to,
Let's,
amend the motion to say that. Judge, would you second that?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Okay, thank you. Anything else on this topic? Very good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda. Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed the minutes from September 9th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 9th?
So moved.
A second.
Motion made, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Pretrial officer. Your Honor, would you like to present that as well?
Yes, Carol McKee had previously spoken to the Board of Commissioners and to the court about requisitioning a position for pretrial assessment so that people would not be incarcerated. There would be more electronic monitoring. And actually there was funding available. We co-signed a grant to that effect. The grant was approved by the state. And the person would be responsible for conducting pretrial investigations, preparing reports for the MDJs to identify the risk and needs and responsivity in the ORS assessment, which we do prior to sentencing for adults right now. Establishing client rules and conditions for pretrial supervision, conducting direct supervision of assigned cases, maintaining contact with the client as well as family, friends, teachers, social agencies, etc., ensuring proper implementation of procedures according to department, in cases of violation of pretrial conditions, then apprehending the person and bringing that person to jail. Providing testimony in court on the bail supervision, maintaining complete case files, participating in the on-call system with the adult probation office, so under the auspices of the adult probation department, conducting presentations before local community, completing required continuing ed and firearms certification, and other such duties. Those were the duties. We've, as I said previously, approved Mr. McKee the grant, to file the grant. The grant, I believe, is 100% now, but I don't know what it will be in the future. My main concern is I don't know where we're going to house the person because the space in adult probation is rather tight. But we'll find a way. It may be...
And this is an ad?
This is an ad.
Not a transition from one position.
This is a new position.
It's a new position. In many counties that are larger, there's a separate office, and a lot of times the office is right in the jail. We can't do that here. Smaller counties generally absorb it in the probation department, but there has to be more or less a paper wall because this person's files, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person has been convicted, and the people who are on supervision have been convicted of offenses. So it's a different type of supervision. I know the county was very interested in saving costs with incarceration, and for nonviolent offenders, this is probably a great solution.
Right.
For that reason.
I hadn't thought of it before, but domestic relations, I think, has one or two literal physical offices that are open, and then be right by an MDJ office. That might make sense.
The concern is that the people that would be coming over for incarceration, generally the MDJ is either beaming in or coming to the jail to conduct those proceedings.
Okay.
So, I mean, but that's generally how it works. So
What's the grant period for this, do you know?
I'm believing it's 2 years.
Sounds right, yeah. Additionally, as I've said before, even very conservative numbers that Carl and I ran would show 100,000 just in variable cost savings from the jail if Carl's. I mean, part of this is the pilot program is to get those numbers. So the state's essentially covering it so that we can, PCCD more accurately,
Right.
is covering the costs in order to run a pilot program more or less. But I think that conservatively, it looks like it would by far pay for itself. It's one of those rare and only times where I can honestly say that.
I wasn't gonna say it, I'm not gonna
Actually,
say it.
Ben, just so you know, this meeting is recorded. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. Because I just hear those lines, it'll pay for itself, but the words just float out, don't
This
they?
time I think it's literally true.
Okay.
Well, in terms of the benefit, I think it's, if it doesn't work, we have the option of, deconstructing if we have to. And if it works, it's a great advantage to our county.
I think that's
So-
wonderful.
How do we measure it?
The measure will be in the outcomes in terms of incarceration dates. You'll be able to track that. Carl has done that in the past with, he's had interns that actually track number of dates of people incarcerated, so it's been helpful. He's usually able to get college interns to do that type of data.
I think you should easily see it in the sheriff's department, or in the jail budget, right? Because if you have less incarcerations, you're gonna have
Should be less.
less variable costs, your census is gonna go down. I mean, I think that should,
Well,
am I
I
right?
guess from my perspective, in my career, I've always had situations like this where something's gonna go into effect, it's gonna be funded for this period of time, and at the end, it's assumed we're just gonna carry on with this position, so it's an additional position,
Right.
but there's never any concrete measurable that shows, in fact, yes, the savings is there in providing for that, so that, okay, the grant money goes away, the savings is legitimately there, but there's never anything ever shown on paper, here's where we were, here's where we are, it's definitely paying for it. And that's where I guess, I've heard it too many times, it's gonna pay for itself, but it's never measured, and that's my point is, where's the measurable gonna be?
I know with the treatment courts, which we did years ago, we're still funded for at this point through the state, that the recidivism dropped, I think we had 71 to 75%. In fact, the state highlighted us as one of the best programs they had because of that, and there was savings that way. And we based that on both recidivism within a 18-month period, I think is what we looked at, and we also based it upon what was paid in terms of fines and costs. The fact that Bonnie was not having a problem collecting fines and costs while people were in the program. So we had something to show for that. That's how we did that. And with this, I would assume that if people are not incarcerated, the cost of housing them would be one factor that we would be using. The second, in terms of what the supervision costs, the amount of personnel, there's one staff dedicated to this, not several probation officers, so it would be built into that. That's what we'll have to look at. And there is fees, supervision fees involved, so we would be tracking those separately. We might have to create another cost center.
What's another?
What's one more?
So, I would like to ask, Your Honor, so, from your position, how do you see this? Is it a good addition, benefit?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And my concern is simply that I can't tell you how it's going to work until we have it up and running, because my sense is anyone, a violent criminal would not be included, because the ORAS would automatically rule out people who have violent histories, because the safety of the public is another concern. But people who are retail theft, they're just poor people who are incarcerated and generally sit in jail until they wend their way through the system, and usually the amount of time that I would sentence that person for is greater than, well, it's less than the time they serve by the time we get to
Okay.
sentencing. So that's why I'm thinking it's a cost. Whenever I'm sentencing somebody to credit for time served, and I look at the credit for time served, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 times the amount of days that the sentencing guidelines would recommend for that person. And because of that, I'm thinking that's the cost. I'm thinking is you don't need to house people who wouldn't even be sentenced to that extensive of a sentence, but they're sitting because they're poor and they can't make bail.
Do you know off the top of your head what the percentage of those types of folks
At
would
one
be?
point I did, Eric, but the problem is we do these statistics periodically and I don't have anything current. I'm
Because
not
that'd be
able to,
obviously-
and we,
I'll
Carl
start
drew
next.
down the data when we signed off on this for the grant. And I'm not able to tell you today because that was pre-COVID.
Yeah,
There was-
Everything's off.
Everything kind of blended after that, and I apologize to you because I really like to have that
There's a few
information.
things to, I think, to keep in mind. One is that part of the grant requires reporting that data,
Mhm.
so Carl and everybody involved is going to be working on that. I think it's up to the commissioners to do their due diligence over the next 2 years in monitoring the budget of the jail. I think that a couple of places, one would be like when they're talking about soft costs, obviously there's food and clothing, but then the health insurance. The biggest reason having people on probation and being monitored that way as a savings is because of the healthcare costs for these people, especially over the course of 6 years or 6 months to a year, it can be pretty expensive. And so we would monitor those numbers, and then as Judge Sturga had stated, there's tons of PCCD statistics that are baked in as far as how many people are incarcerated, what they're incarcerated for, their length of stay. We would work with them on that to determine that as well.
And the other interesting point that you brought up in terms of costs when it comes to medical costs, what I've seen is a number of people with mental health conditions, the longer they sit, the less able they are when they get out, the more resistant they are to treatment. But usually at time of arrest, people are much more resilient when it comes to, if only this or that, I'll do it. So perhaps we'll get people into the system that need help earlier for either drug or alcohol or mental health. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, when they're on probation, that you have the court has the ability to push them into recovery, which is a really good thing. With the minute that door opens and they're done and they've maxed their sentence out, everything's up for grabs. And so we really want them monitored on ankle bracelets or whatever. We want them going to meetings, getting involved in the community, and from my perspective, I agree with Commissioner Cafferlin in that I'll be surprised if this doesn't work. Let's put it that way. So.
All right, well, with that, the position before us is to create a pretrial officer position. Have you already made a selection? Who posted this?
I know, and at this point, because we needed to be approved first, and while we know he's gotten the verbal from the state, he has not gotten everything in writing, and until that's in place, we wouldn't do anything, but we wanted to know that the position was approved so he could advertise.
Okay, then we would open the position effective today for a pretrial officer in the adult probation office. Full-time union with benefits, $15.50 an hour, 40 hours a week. And it is a new position signed off by everyone that needs to sign off on it. Do I hear a motion for this position?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion made, seconded, discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, part-time clerical assistant in Veterans Affairs. This is the existing position that's a full-time clerical position in Veterans Affairs. The request is to make it a part-time position opposed to immediately. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Same pay rate and everything?
yes, same for it, yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Are you rescinding the full?
We're rescinding the full one, exactly. So the motion would be to, I don't know if we need to rescind. I mean, we
we
I
need,
make a motion to adjust the position from a full-time position to a part-time position under the standard outlined in the union contract for the Veterans Affairs Office.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, discussion.
What does part-time mean in terms of hours?
It means under 1,000 hours a year.
And 24 hours a week.
and
And
24 hours a week.
Yes.
Because roughly, if you take, if you take,
That you're at,
you're at 20, basically 19 to 20 hours a week, what you say, so it's gonna be over the year, under 1,000, and a week has to be 24 less.
Correct.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Because if you pay them more, it states in the contract that you have to pay them benefits.
Okay, all right.
We need to
Thank you
work
for
on
that
too.
clarification.
There's a long list of things.
Yeah, yeah, that blows my mind.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? It should be fairly simple as it's cost savings. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
I,
Opposed likewise, motion carries. Next, election workers. The CARES Act money has to be spent on COVID-related things. One of the things that COVID-19, I guess, created in terms of a problem in the county is that the mail-in ballots are radically high. I think we're at over 6,000 ballots received so far,
well, distributed,
or distributed, excuse me,
or requested, I should say.
which is an incredible percentage of our normal voting population for presidential elections. So it's followed a lot of internal work before the elections office. We had created previously with CARES Act money a couple of part-time positions, frankly, opening mail and processing out ballot applications, that sort of thing. And Commissioner Eggleston, you're now requesting
I have two of the exact same position, be part-time until the election. So my motion would be to create two additional temporary positions that would be part-time under the same parameters as the previous two, to end at the same time as the other two, because I think we had a conversation about it being like the end of the week of the election.
so here's November 6th.
Yeah,
don't you want to, again, because of this kind of unique situation, don't you want to make it until the election results are confirmed? I thought you might want to have that.
I think that's a really good
I
idea.
don't know.
I
but
think
mean,
that's
just-
a really good
I'm
idea.
thinking you might, maybe you
Yeah.
won't, maybe whatever they need to do is
Yeah.
done. I don't know what they're.
Only until December 31st,
Yeah, I think that's a good
because
idea.
CARES Act money ends then.
I will amend my point to state that would be until the end of the year. And I would further amend it to state that the other two positions could be required to stay until the end of the year. So there would be four,
As needed.
as needed.
Right.
The only reason that they might potentially be called into question is if there's a recount in the state of Pennsylvania, which is very unlikely, but it's possible. So-
We're a swing state, so I'm thinking that's very likely that
It's more
something
possible than
may.
ever.
Well, it really depends on a lot of factors, but it's just as, I suppose it's just as possible as it is not likely. So, anyway, and I would just, well, that's my motion.
Pam, could you read back that motion?
Okay, to create two additional part-time positions with the same parameters as previous two positions, and amended that this will be effective until December 12th, 2020, which includes the other two positions, and they would be as needed after November 6th.
The only thing I would
December
change
31.
is December 31st, not December 12th.
And then, it doesn't explicitly say in there that it would be elections. What is that position you would be called, election worker?
Oh, yes.
Observer.
And it's part-time without benefits.
According to, just, I have a couple questions. I guess just making a statement according to Ken's email to us, they're paid via 1099.
No, if the other two are
The other
not,
two.
are they?
Yes, we did 1099.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
And what's, out of curiosity, what's the pay rate?
1282, we took it from the normal clerical position.
Okay.
Just how do you get around your hourly? Okay.
What is the rate, Kim?
1282.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else that needs to be clarified. Any other questions?
Would you,
Is the motion seconded?
it is not.
Motion needs to be seconded.
I'll second
Any seconds? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
So just a few things, just to clarify. So the amount of mail-in ballots and absentee ballots is roughly running about 7 to 8 times greater than what we would see in a regular election. And Lisa normally has helped. The two that she has have been incredibly helpful. Frankly, I don't know how Lisa would have done anything without their help. The problem is that she's, again, having issues with addressing all of the administrative functions of her position because she's doing a lot of manual labor. And in order to make sure that this election is as seamless as possible, I think it's prudent to have as many hands on the oars as possible. These people will definitely be put to good use. And then finally, again, this is CARES Act eligible, and obviously the mail-in ballots and everything are related to that, so it's a very easy use of the money for this purpose.
it. Other funds available?
There are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? All those in favor of creation of 2 additional election worker positions, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carries. Next, salary increase for intake clerk typist. I know nothing about it, so go ahead, please take it away.
Yes, so currently, the person in this position is paid $29,835, and I did attach the job description to your packet. And in red, it outlines the increase in duties. And it's basically under the mental health portion of the job description. They are to provide an individual ESU number to departments as requested, and to the demographic data for mental health consumers with the state data systems for state referral purposes, act as point of contact fiscal for the mental health and state data systems for the purpose of problem resolution, assign and close ESU numbers, document in the state data system the services being provided to the identified mental health individual, update any changes of information to maintain accuracy of reporting, verify any number of state data systems for insurance purposes, verify if a mental health individual is enrolled in the NWPA life program, collects, provides information requests by a fixed challenge unit regarding 302 status of identified individuals from the retired current mental health data systems, and finally expunges information according to regulations from the retired current mental health data system. So with all of these increase in volumes of the clerical, new paperwork, increased computer work, verifying data and such, they requested the salary to be moved to $33,735, which is a $3,900 increase annually, but only $567 of that is coming from me.
So I have the same question I had about the other office. Is this position union?
Yes, it is.
And so why is this before salary board? I mean, is this clerk 2 going to number 3? Or vice versa? Or are you just asking for a unilateral?
Just a unilateral increase.
Then once again, I think that's something that needs to be addressed in the collective bargaining unit, not before this body.
Okay.
Does anyone disagree or am I wrong about that?
Well, I think that we should get more explanation about it, because you know what I mean, like, if Rana or somebody in the administration is advocating for it and feels it's justified, I'd like to hear that justification. The other thing is again, what's the union's position on us changing one position, unless the other positions are changing?
Yeah, I misunderstood. I had thought that it was one type of clerk typist or something that was going to another tier, like rescinding that office and creating another position, but from what I'm reading here, it just looks like it's request for an increase, which is not appropriate here. Okay, next would be non-union salary increases for 2021. Commissioner Durbin, have we done an acceptable job of explaining previously how we got to our current non-union wages?
Sure.
Wait,
I'm
briefly.
sure this formulaic, it looks like there's some outside surveys there.
Yes, there's an outside test survey that is based on other six-class counties.
Okay.
So the deal we came up with, boy, that was 2 or 3 years ago already. 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago, and this is the third and final phase to catch up some of the employees that were underpaid based on the Hess survey. The ones that were at the average or above were given the standard 2% increase over the last few years, whereas the others have been caught up by taking that difference between the average and their current pay and dividing it by 3.
Yep, got it.
So this has kind of been something that's been anticipated for the last 3 years. This would be the final one, and from here on, everybody should be pretty well caught up. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be, there's some variation, but it won't be as wildly variant as it was when we started looking into this in 2016 and 2017. So Kim, you have listed here the increases with the final 1/3, and then 2%. So the final 2021 salary, I guess I'm looking at that last, second to last column. So we'll take, for instance, Scott Rose. Is your recommendation that we do the 47,915 or the 44,793?
My recommendation is we do the final third of the Hess survey.
Okay. So HR's recommendation is to do the 2021 salary at 2%, with the exception of the instances where the Hess survey indicated otherwise, correct?
Yes, we only have one individual, the chief clerk position, that the 2% outweighs the third of the Hess.
Okay.
What's the cumulative amount of that increase? I don't think that's anywhere here.
From the beginning of the survey? Or, oh, I mean, just,
It's at the bottom right, the 11,319. Sorry.
I think that was different.
Oh,
We have done that over one.
yeah, you have something on that.
Oh. Good.
Oh,
This is the packet that Pam handed out.
yeah, okay, 11, okay, so what can we do is this, all right, 11,300. Very good.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
It does.
It's like near $35,000.
Yeah, I think that
Oh, wait, I'm not done.
This is the,
Yeah, that's more like it. I mean, if you look down the column of 2%, which I'm assuming is the increase, on average, they're close to $1,000.
well, no, I think that bottom column is just the accumulation for that one column, for those handful that are listed there. So, yeah.
Well, if you look at just the 2020 salary on the left and the 2021 2%, you go from $1,661,000 to $1,693,000,
Yeah.
and that doesn't include the
I don't have that.
change in the other ones.
Well, I think that's the total, that would be 32,000, right?
which would be in line with
With what the total is.
yeah. Extrapolating.
no, I'm just trying to, I can't really read this last sheet.
Well, I don't think that we have the subtotal for the third of the Hess. And,
Correct.
Less the 2%, which should have been the, because the difference would be the issue, right?
Okay, so,
That's fine, I can. totals, that's all I was thinking. Particularly in this year, we are,
Yeah, I think it's just the ones in orange are obviously above the 2% level,
Right.
so.
But you would figure the difference with the 2%, correct? That's what you're looking for?
No, the
I was just
2% is the bottom bare minimum.
Right, that's what I was saying, if you were going to give, or make the assumption you were going to give the 2%, then what you'd be looking at is the difference between that test survey and the 2%. To come up with the difference in the amount, that would be what you're looking at in terms of the numbers, is that right?
except it appears as though there's some other position that with increases, like for Scott Rose, he's gonna go from 43 to 47, which is way more than the 2%.
Yeah, because that's the S.
That's the Hess.
Right. So you have to really add both those columns up to know what the actual variance is.
Yeah, but the complicated thing is then you have to subtract the 2% ones.
Yep,
There's
Right,
something
and yeah,
Correct.
that's what, do something with it to recognize or address it, that's all I was saying.
I see what you're saying.
Right, I guess just read it, so ask 2%, Mays, the 2%, McCorson, the 2%, and then Rose would be 4,000.
Well, I don't think it actually would be 4,000, because
If you take difference between the 16,
the,
61,
you're correct, yeah, no, sorry.
I'm coming up around 60,000.
Okay, then McKee would get an increase of 3,922. Walters and Bull would get the 2%. Matthew would get the 2%, because that would be greater, right? Estes, Cantrell would also get 2%. Hooser would get $2,056 more. Strickland, the 2%. Brown, 4,831. I forget how to pronounce Tatiana's last name. Elise, 3,700. What?
Cody Brown,
Yeah.
he should be at 5,000, because that's what was agreed to
Oh.
2 years ago,
What?
that for each year he would be, go to 5,000.
Yeah, we just double check that number.
Okay,
I thought it was just guaranteed for the money.
yeah, I think he was just averaging it.
No?
Okay, well, if the motion was made previously to make it 5,000 even, that's just 100.
Yeah, we'll just double check
I'll
that.
double check that, but
Okay, I thought it was just guaranteed for the money.
Okay, well, if it's 5,000 exactly, whatever. We'll make this motion to be up to 5,000 based on the previous contract, or previous agreements. Henderson, 2%, McConnor, 2,028.30, Rivet, 2%, Enlow, Hearn, Exley, Miller, Barr, 2%, Collins, 3,473, Lechner, McDunn, Tipton, Fetzik, 2%, Beers, 2,145, Grubbs, 2,834, Nordine, 3,868, Glotz, 3,255, Kitte, 2%, Gilbert, 4,025, Steck, 2%, and then the tip staff would be, is that 2%?
Yep, 2%
Okay.
of the hourly rate.
Okay, 2%, which would be 23-cent increase per hour for Hoffman, 28 for Boonen, 24 for Sutton, 23 for Wallen. And then the ADA would be 75 cents, an hour increase, and the Chief County Detective, 67 cents increase. Okay, any questions? Do I have a motion to approve what I just stated?
So moved.
One second.
Motion made and seconded, any discussion?
So I need to mention that you did a study, in that study that we did, Susquehanna came in. and-
Oh, yeah, that's the, yeah.
And it said, if you combine treasurer and tax claim for assessment, it would save 60,000. Since then, you've increased the pay for tax claim, I'm not sure how much. So I'm going to say your that savings is 70, 80,000 now, of which you haven't addressed.
Okay,
in that, so I don't know where you're at with those points in that study that we paid $100,000 for.
We paid about $10,000 for the county tax errors, but yes.
The whole study was $100,000.
So we are doing it in phases. The first phase, this is the EIP/STAMP program, had to do with fiscal software. Eric, what were the following phases?
That big, I'm trying to think of all of them. Well, there's recommendations for all the departments, almost all the departments.
Right.
I haven't been working on any of those other departments really. The only big thing was which we got approval for, was some
Mostly fiscal at this point.
finance-related stuff regarding other departments and the way they move money, processes and mechanics of moving money to different bank accounts and stuff, which we're about to start.
So we have the elections meeting starting in a minute, so we need to wrap up the date. The motion was made and seconded.
The other thing you've talked about is you've talked about the concern of where are the tax dollars at?
Right.
And are you ignoring it at this time with this?
I think that's a fair question. I think the question for the body is do we want to follow through with this as we discussed 2 years ago, and then with the understanding that we've done everything that we possibly could in order to address it, so that when people come back to complain in 6 months, that we've stated that you know, I mean, that's what you're going to weigh. On the flip side of it, if we don't do this, you know, okay, are we going to then have to readdress this issue repeatedly over the next couple of years? You know, as people continue to state, you know, so-and-so in McKean County makes this, so-and-so in this place makes this, and
Well, Jeff, to your point, is when we did the salaries for the row offices, you said that no one should make more than a commissioner. Well, how many of these people are going to make more than you now?
no, I did, that's not what I said. What I said was that the 2 or 3 elected offices that would make more than the commissioner have less responsibility than they do. That's what I said.
Okay.
And I still voted for no raise for myself.
But you agreed to
Well, I mean-
1.5% for the other row offices. But yeah, there's no issue here of just,
Well, I'd like to say that my
Increase.
state of mind in that meeting was good, but it was not. If to do it all over again, I probably would have done it different, but.
you know, and I hear the concern for money, but I don't hear it in this.
What you're hearing here is equity and follow-through on a plan that is 3 years old.
Yep.
If we have to make cuts otherwise, it's going to be in other ways. It could mean layoffs, frankly, but it's not, personally, I'm not interested in deviating from this.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we acknowledge that it's not a perfect solution. I mean,
I
it's,
just think you're in the middle of a pandemic, and that's the only reason that you would want to maybe think through. I understand where you guys are totally coming from. I am all for fairness in pay and making sure we keep everybody up to date. I don't know.
Well, I guess if in trying times, if you would ask people, what would you rather have? Be laid off or a cut in pay? And this is not a cut in pay. So when you face the fact of where are you going to get the money to pay the people in the long run, I guess then you're going to have a decision to make at that point.
Again, that could be voluntary layoffs, that could be voluntary furloughs. There are steps between there and other and layoffs or whatever. But again, I think this is equitable. It's something that I can point to and say we had a professional study done. This is it.
I'm going to disagree with the professional study. All it was is this lady took CCAP information, put it into a spreadsheet, and you called it a study. I disagree.
When's the next salary board meeting? Can we table this and?
Well, you got a budget, right?
I got a budget.
But we know what the variance is gonna be,
Right.
and we
Either way.
understand that.
I don't have a problem with tabling it, you know, for
I
2 more
just-
weeks to have reflection on it as we work
I
on the
think,
budget.
I would personally like to, and I'm cool with that, and we can budget as a variance, but showing the information that you've given us already, I think we're gonna have some concerns and issues with 2021, And I just wouldn't, I kind of agree with Denny in that the person can still be employed and hold off on this plan for 1 year. I'm not saying forever. Is that something we should consider? So
Okay.
that's just my thought,
Well,
but
do you wanna approve,
We have a motion.
do
we
you
do
wanna,
have a
do you
motion.
wanna approve 2%
But
today and then come back in the next item, or if you wanna make an
If
adjustment?
I could, first of all, we need to wrap this meeting up.
Yes, we
But there is a motion on the table, however, a motion to table would trump it. So if you were making a motion to table and not seconded it, this could be tabled. Otherwise, we need to take a vote on the motion before us.
I would make a motion to table this until the next meeting and
I'll
reflect
second
on it.
that.
Motion made and seconded to table, that's not debatable. All those in favor, please state aye. All right, everything's set.
And I guess I would just ask that we,
What numbers do you
that
have?
we continue to work on the numbers, and then if we have to have a special meeting for someone.
Sure, we can schedule it.
Yeah, and
I have
yeah,
one
Do you have a
number.
motion to adjourn?